Kyle Austin, Mike Griffith here, sitting in front of a beautiful East Lansing sunset
That's
behind
right.
us.
That's what we're known for here at East
After
Lansing,
Michigan State's 24-7 win over Maryland. We'll get to the big game next week later, but first of all, let's start with the quarterbacks, actually. Connor Cook, we got a lot of strange, conflicting information. I guess the bottom line is Connor Cook says he's okay, he's going next week, but some strange things happen on the quarterback.
You know, for a while there, though, Kyle, you kind of wondered if maybe the sun set on Michigan State's season when Connor Cook was taken out of the game, and we didn't really know his status. Mark D'Antonio telling us that, you know, he felt like he could have put him back in there, but that maybe Connor didn't have the same arm strength or couldn't throw as strong as he could in the first half because of the injury. So why not go with Tyler O'Connor? D'Antonio had decided just by chance earlier in the game to give O'Connor a series. He hadn't had one really all season, and it worked out that series kind of prepped him for a situation that came up later in the game when Connor landed on his throwing shoulder a little funny. And, you know, we saw Connor. They brought him to the post-game press conference. You know, he looked irritated like he usually does when he doesn't play well. You know, Dave Warner looked irritated. Everybody looked upset except for the defensive coaches and Mark D'Antonio. Mark D'Antonio, Kyle, actually said he feels pretty good about this team as they go into Ohio State next week.
And I think that's because of the defense, because you contrast what happened last week at Nebraska when they gave up 39 points. Secondary just looks porous. Defensive line gets no sacks, doesn't get much pressure. They did a lot of things better today, and a lot of that is playing at home against Maryland, which had lost 6 straight coming in. But they weren't talking about that. They were talking about, I think they did overall play better. They got more pressure. I think they're starting to get a little bit more cohesion in that back end, too.
Season high 5 turnovers, and I really thought the key for the secondary was Darian Hicks coming back. Because getting Darian Hicks back enabled Demetrius Cox to go back to safety. We saw Monte Nicholson, a more studied and more humble Monte Nicholson, back at safety, play a really good football game. And, you know, Grayson Miller and Kari Willis, look, those guys got the job done when there were some struggles back there. And I'm not ready to say that they're both headed to the bench, but it looked to me like the best secondary was the most experienced secondary. It looked, as you would think, Darian Hicks is back now from that concussion he suffered against Rutgers. Arjun Calhoun had a big game today, an interception that set up a field goal. And then Demetrius Cox, I think, looks that much better at safety than he does corner. And Monte Nicholson, number 9. I mean, this is a guy Michigan State really needs to beat a team like Ohio State that has all those great players, Kyle. But, you know, also the defensive line made some noise today.
They did, and we're to the point now we can finally talk about Ohio State. It's been the game looming over this team, I think, for the entire year. Where are they right now? Obviously, they had lost 2 weeks ago. Where do you think this team is heading into this game?
Well, you know, defensively, I think they're in a pretty good place. And, you know, it's kind of funny. Going into the Michigan game, I think the feeling was kind of a lot like going into the Ohio State game. You looked at it and on the surface, you go, how can that Michigan State team that we just saw play these last 2 weeks compete down there in Columbus? And I think a lot of people thought that going into the Michigan game because they hadn't really looked that well against Purdue or against Rutgers. And yet they go out there and there's a different level of play. And that's the way it is with Michigan State. They do play really well against Michigan. They do play really well against Ohio State. They play well in the big games. They get up for the big games when they're the underdog, and they will be an underdog. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the line for this game was 9 or 10 points even.
I think it'd be more than that.
It could be even more than that when you look at how well J.T. Barrett played against them last year. But, you know, to me, this is about where Michigan State should be. Now, you could argue and say maybe they should have looked more impressive earlier this year. And, you know, the run game has certainly sputtered. You know, you can look on MLive.com and see the comparative analysis. This is the worst run game that Mark D'Antonio's had at Michigan State in terms of national rankings. But from the perspective of the way the defense is playing, and even though Connor probably played his worst game of his career today, you know, he's still Connor Cook. He's got some big throws in him, and you just get the feeling that we're going to see a more dialed-in team next week, Kyle.
I think the bottom line for Mark D'Antonio is the whole point of these first 11 weeks of the season have either 9 or 10 wins. Obviously, they would have liked 10, but you're looking at 9. You can still win the Big Ten if you win next week and the week after. They still think they can go to the college football playoff. I know there's some people who probably feel like they can't still at this point, or they wouldn't have a good shot. But, you know, they have a lot of goals still in front of them.
Well, they do, and you know, you got to get here. And even though it hasn't been pretty, I mean, Mark D'Antonio told everyone he wasn't looking for style points. And certainly today there was opportunities in the second half where Michigan State could have extended that lead, but they didn't. They ran the ball. They got a lot of guys in there. I mean, he's going to do it his way, folks. He's not going to cave to the system and you know, throw passes in the fourth quarter when he's up 3 scores and kick meaningless field goals. That's just not the way Mark D'Antonio approaches it. And he does. He believes that if the Spartans win out and take care of business at Columbus, which would be a huge upset, and then come home and beat Penn State, and then they would play in a Big Ten title game and win that, I mean, he's really of the faith that his football program would find its way in the top 4. I mean, honestly, right now, Kyle, today, that didn't look like one of the 4 best teams in the country to me, but all you got to do is be the best on that Saturday. And if they can beat Ohio State, they'll extend their playoff hopes again.
All right. Well, that'll do it for today. Check with mlive.com/Spartans for all the coverage, and we'll see you next week.